Welcome to Chapter 9 in Marketing Analytics. This chapter is all about advertising. We have lots of different ways we communicate with the marketplace. Advertising is still, believe it or not, very popular and still pretty effective. So there are many ways we can evaluate how we're doing in advertising. Unfortunately, there are lots of forms of advertising. I'm talking offline advertising, where it's hard to assess how you're doing. So think about billboards, for example. It's just difficult to really determine how many people saw the billboard, how many people made a purchase because of the billboard, things like that. And really, if we're talking about TV advertising, it's really more about calculating how many people actually saw your advertising, and then we can make some sort of assumptions because of that. So let's just go ahead and jump right into some formulas here. Three terms that we need to understand right up front, and there are three terms that comprise the formula you see on the screen. The first one is called impressions, and this is just the total number of ad exposures, the number of times an ad has been seen. That includes people who have seen it more than once. If one person saw the ad 3 times, that counts as 3 impressions. Okay. Reach, total number of people exposed to an ad. So basically, it's just unique individuals that saw an ad. Those two concepts, impressions and reach, are used a lot in digital marketing and social media marketing, analyzing those types of things. Okay, so you may have seen those numbers, those terms before. The third term is frequency, which is just basically the average number of exposures to an ad, or in other words, the average number of times each individual saw the ad. Okay, so if I ask you to calculate a number of impressions, I could give you the number of people who saw the ad and an average frequency, and you can calculate the impressions. So let's say Buc-ee's puts an ad on TV. You should all know Buc-ee's, right? Pretty fun, convenience store. There's a new one in Denton, so if you are near Denton, definitely check it out. It's pretty fun. Okay. Let's assume they've determined that their reach was 10,000 people saw their ad, an average of 4.5 times. So the question is, what is their total number of impressions, or what is the total number of times their ad was seen? It's just simply going to be reach times frequency, and ends up being 45,000 impressions. Okay. We can move that formula around to solve for any other variable. So we can solve for average frequency here. So Budweiser puts an ad on television. They know they have 1.345 million impressions. They know their reach was 325,000 viewers. Therefore, their average frequency, quite simply, is 4.14. And you can just round that to the nearest 2 digits. It really doesn't matter, just as long as you're consistent. Okay. We can also move that formula around and solve for reach. So AT&T puts an ad on television. They have 303,544 total views of the ad or impressions. Their average frequency is 7.65 times. Therefore, our reach is 39,679 people viewed the ad at least once. Okay, and that's a number you should definitely round. You can round it up or down to the nearest integer. It doesn't really matter. Okay. All right. Then we have something called gross ratings points. So if you think back to other classes where you may have learned about the Nielsen ratings, this kind of comes from that. The math here is overly simple, so don't overthink it. Okay, so basically gross ratings points is just a number of basically points that a particular ad has received. Okay, and so It's a little weird number, but there's not a whole lot to say about it in terms of how we define it. Just know that the higher the number, the better. Okay, so if we have a pretty simple example here, we have basically 10 times the ad was inserted into a TV program. Okay, there were 5 individuals that potentially could have seen the ad. Those are our 5 targets, we can say. Okay, so any place you see a 1 in these 5 columns is yes, the ad was seen by that individual. 0 means no, the ad was not seen. Okay, so you would calculate the number of impressions for each individual by adding up the number of ones in these columns A through E, add those up. So ad 1 was seen by 3 people, ad 2 was seen by 3, ad 3 was seen by 3, and so on and so on. Ad 6 was seen by only 2, as well as 7, 8, 9, and 10 all were seen only by 1 person. Okay, 10 insertions or 10 airings of the ad. These are the impressions per airing or insertion. Sum all those up, you get total impressions of 22. Okay, and then what you could do is determine this basic ratings points. It's just basically calculate a number of impressions divided by the population, then you multiply it by 100. Okay, so it doesn't show the 100 there, but that's how that works. So to calculate this number, it's just 3 divided by the population, which is 5. You would include it in the denominator, all 5 individuals, regardless if they saw the ad or not. Okay, so ratings points is going to be 3 divided by 5, which is 0.6. Multiply that by 100, you get 60. And you would do the same thing for all 10 insertions of the ad and sum those up, and you get a total gross rating points of 440. Okay, so there's 3 ways to calculate this whole concept of gross ratings points, kind of the grand total of all the ratings. The first one is just this number right here, so it's 440. You can also do it this way, just the total number of impressions divided by the defined population. The total number of impressions was 22, the population was 5. 22 divided by 5 times 100 gives you that same number, 440. Okay, the third way to calculate it, and you can calculate it any 3 of these ways, and you may have to choose one over the other based on the information that you're given. But you could be given reach percentage and average frequency, and then you can use that to determine gross ratings points. Okay, reach percentage you calculate as the total reach divided by the total population. Okay, so reach is just the number of individuals who saw the ad. So in this situation, reach is 1, 2, 3, 4. You would not include individual C because they never saw the ad. Okay, so reach is going to be 4 divided by the total population, which is going to be everyone, again, regardless of if they saw the ad or not, which is 5. So your reach percentage is 80%. So given that, we can calculate gross ratings points, which is just going to be our reach percentage. I'm sorry, we got to calculate average frequency first. So average frequency we've talked about before is just impressions divided by reach. Okay, impressions divided by reach. You can see it right there, impressions divided by reach. And so average frequency then is 5.5. And so to determine gross ratings points, all you do is you drop the percentage here. So you want to keep it in the same terms as this. So it's just going to be simply 80. Multiply that times 5.5, this number. So it gives you 440. So you can arrive at gross ratings points in any of those 3 methods. Okay, and again, the one you use could depend on the information that you are given. For example, I could give you reach percentage and average frequency and not give this entire table, and you would obviously have to use that particular formula. Okay, then we have something called cost per 1,000 impressions. This basically is a measure of efficiency of your ads. This is used in both TV ads as well as in social media ads. This is basically you're comparing your costs of advertising to views, okay? So cost per 1,000 impressions is abbreviated CPM. The M stands for 1,000, not million. Don't get confused there. That is the Roman numeral for 1,000, okay? The reason we do it per 1,000 impressions instead of per one impression is because the cost per impression is going to be very, very low, like maybe 1,000th or 1/10,000th of a cent. And so, it's hard to really compare. So we do it in thousands, okay? So the formula, again, is just advertising cost divided by 1,000th of your impressions. Okay, so here's an example. Dallas Mavericks put an ad on television. It cost them $4,000. They discover that there were 120,000 views or impressions of the ad, so the cost per 1,000 ends up being $33.33. Okay, so pretty high. It's a pretty high number in a grand scheme of things. And if they could somehow tie that number to the number of tickets were sold because of the ad, then then we could tell if it was really a good good number or not. Okay. Another example, they've decided to run another ad campaign, but kind of a more lengthy one. And so they're trying to figure out which of these plans to use, plan A or plan B. So plan A is going to cost him $350,000. Plan B will cost him $250,000. So the question is, which of these plans is going to be a better deal in terms of cost per 1,000? So plan A, I mentioned, was $350,000. Divide that by the 1,000th of the million impressions, and you end up with $35 cost per 1,000. Plan B, you come up with, remember I mentioned it was $250,000, you come up with a cost per 1,000 of $25. Okay, so based purely on cost, this is the analysis, and you would say, well, plan B is definitely much better. It's cheaper, it's got higher reach. Even though the average frequency is lower, it's still okay. Okay, but you can calculate, ad campaign attractiveness based on reach, based on frequency, based on lots of different things. Okay, so that's cost per 1,000. Question is, in terms of cost per 1,000, how expensive are different advertising types? And you can see here that direct mail is super expensive. It's about $450. Mail order catalogs is about $250. They're pretty expensive because they're mailing costs, printing costs, things like that. Radio and TV are also expensive, $140 and $30 respectively, because you've got to pay pretty significant media costs. Online display and search ads and video ads, there's no mailing or media costs, and lots of activity online these days, and so your cost per 1,000 is much cheaper going digital. So if keeping the cost per 1,000 low is your ultimate goal, then you absolutely want to do digital, but you have to understand if is that where your targets are going to be exposed to your ad. I mean, they may not be. Okay, they may be more B2B we're talking about, maybe direct mail and catalogs are a better use of your money. Okay. Another question that comes up is, well, how often should you show an ad? Okay. And we're not going to do any calculations here. This would come in the advanced kind of microeconomics class, but just know that there are different kind of theories about how effective is advertising. Okay, so this black line here is linear, just basically means that the more you expose people to an ad, the more effective the ad is going to be. Okay. Then we have something called the learning or S-curve, which is this squiggly one, just basically that early exposures aren't that effective, but once you build on them, as you add more exposures, the rate of effectiveness grows until some point, then it kind of flattens out. Okay. And the third one is what we call threshold value, just basically means that first couple exposures really do nothing, and then there's some point where an additional exposure really ramps up effectiveness, and then you hit a ceiling, and after that there's no reason to continue advertising in that particular campaign. Okay. So just want to show you that there are kind of different theories about how effective each subsequent exposure of an ad is. Okay, and so which one is right, we don't really know. It's kind of hard to measure, but just know that these are some theories related to that. Okay, we can also talk about what we call effective reach. Okay, so basically, it's a number of people or percentage of the audience that receives the message greater than the effective, the effective frequency. Okay, and so a very, very, very simple calculation here. So quite simple. You're just going to determine what the effective frequency is, and then just calculate the number of people or the percentage of people that saw that number of exposures or that number of frequency and above. So let me just go through some examples to hopefully make that more clear. So we've determined that for whatever reason our effective frequency is 3. Any frequency below that doesn't really move the needle. Consumers don't really know who we are, but starting at 3, we start to generate demand and payback on our advertising. Okay. So the question is, given our information over here, 140,000 people saw the ad 0 times, 102,000 saw it 1 time, and so on and so on. So the question is, if the effective frequency is 3, what is our effective reach? You can calculate this in terms of number of people or also in percentage of people in the population. So by numbers, we know that the effective frequency is 3. So basically anyone who saw the ad 3 or more times is going to be part of our effective reach. So all you do is simply add this number and this number. Okay, 23,000 plus 11,000 gives us 34,000. You can also do it as a percentage of the total population. So basically you're going to take this number divided by the total population. That gives you an effective reach percentage of 10%. So basically by advertising 3 times, we will effectively reach 10% of the population, quite simply. Okay. All right, then we have something called share of voice, just basically what percentage of the advertising messages in a particular market are our messages. Okay. So simple formula is just brand advertising divided by total market advertising. Okay. So very simple example. Assume we're talking about the Denton TV advertising market. LSA Burger decides to spend $10,000 in a month on advertising. Whataburger decides to spend $60,000 a month on advertising in Denton. So what will be LSA Burger's share of voice? It's just their brand advertising dollars divided by the total market advertising dollars. So it's going to be 10,000, their spend, divided by the sum of the entire market, which all the information we're given is these 2 companies. So we're going to assume the total market advertising spend is $70,000, and that gives us a share of voice of roughly 14%. So this assumes that these 2 companies are the only companies, advertising in the market. There could be many, many more, but this is just a simplified example. Okay, and that's it. So hopefully this was an enjoyable lecture. It's the math is not complicated. The gross ratings points is probably going to be where you have the biggest challenge, but just don't overthink it. The book does a decent job of explaining it. Thanks.